I'll now hand it over to the next presenter, Morgan Boncyk. Apologies if I pronounce your name wrongly. And over to
No,
you, Morgan.
thank you. And that was actually correct pronunciation.
All right.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
All right, so good afternoon and good evening. My name is Morgan Boncyk. The study assesses animal source food consumption and allocation in low-income households in Nairobi, Kenya. Malnutrition is a persistent problem in Kenya with over a quarter of the population undernourished. Animal source foods are rich in calories and nutrients that are important for human growth, maintenance, and repair. In low-income populations, animal source foods are considered a luxury product, and intake is low among the urban poor, adults, and children in Nairobi, Kenya. It is unknown how animal source foods are distributed among the household, but food in general is unequally distributed. Prioritizing certain household members for animal source foods likely influences differences in intra-household allocation. Prioritization involves the cognitive decision-making process, whereas allocation involves the assignment of resources, which could be influenced by a variety of factors, prioritization being one of these factors. Cultural beliefs limit animal source food consumption among women and children, the household members that would benefit the most from animal source food intake. Quantifying the allocation of these foods across household members is important for understanding household food consumption dynamics. This study aims to determine if intra-household animal source food prioritization and allocation can predict their consumption and dietary diversity. This is part of a larger study that assessed drivers of demand for animal source foods in low-income informal settlements in Nairobi, Kenya. This was a cross-sectional study that took place in 2019 with 300 mothers of children 6 months to 5 years from two-parent households. Mothers reported animal source practices through prioritization, allocation, and consumption. Survey questions asked who in the household was prioritized for specific animal source foods. Clay and water modeled meat and milk allocation. 24-hour dietary recalls were collected for children and mothers. Animal source food consumption was any intake the previous day. Dietary diversity was the food groups consumed the previous day. Prioritization and allocation predicted consumption using regressions. On average, there were 4 members per household. Children were 2 years of age and parents 30. Half of children were female. Nearly all were food insecure. Most households consumed animal source foods the previous day. The graph shows animal source foods types on the x-axis, and bar heights represent the percent who consumed that food. Green bars represent household consumption, brown children, and gray mothers. Dairy was the primary animal source food consumed. 90% of children and mothers consumed animal source foods the previous day, with similar consumption rates across all foods assessed. They consumed an average of 4.5 food groups. Mothers prioritized children for animal source foods, as shown in the graph. The x-axis has the different types of foods, and bar heights represent the percent that mothers were prioritized. Brown bars represent children, gray mothers, blue fathers, and purple when no one was prioritized. 94% of mothers prioritized their child. Prioritization was associated with mother's age, household income, and food security status. Prioritization was not associated with the diets of children or mothers. When assessing allocation, we found mothers allocated a greater proportion of animal source foods to children after adjusting for energy requirements. The graph shows mothers' allocation of meat and milk. Brown bars represent proportion allocated to children, gray mothers, and blue fathers. A bar height of 0.33 would indicate equitable allocation among households. Children were allocated the most meat and milk for their energy requirements, and mothers the least. Allocation was associated with the child and mother's age and breastfeeding status. Prioritization was associated with allocation to children and mothers, but not fathers. The table shows the association between household members prioritized for and allocated animal source foods. Prioritization to children was positively associated with more animal source food allocated to them. However, when any other household member was prioritized, the child was allocated less. When the child was prioritized, mothers were allocated less. When mothers or fathers were prioritized, mothers were allocated more. Allocation was associated with child's diet. The table shows the association between allocation with animal source food consumption and dietary diversity for children and mothers. A greater proportion of animal source foods allocated to the child was positively associated with child's diet. A greater proportion allocated to mothers was negatively associated with child's diets. A greater proportion allocated to fathers trended towards a negative association with child's animal source food consumption and mother's dietary diversity. All other associations were non-significant. We found that children were prioritized for and allocated more animal source foods in low-income settings. Prioritization was not associated with the diets of children or mothers. Allocation was associated with child's animal source food consumption and dietary diversity. Hypothetical allocation of foods that incorporated the assignment of resources appear to be more predictive of child's actual food consumption, suggesting that future studies should assess more than just cognitive decision-making processes of prioritization. Accurate assessment of intra-household animal source food prioritization and allocation are needed for understanding individual access to healthy diets. Thank you.